Hi, the observationist here. Today I'm going to be talking about the nine dash line. I don't know if you've heard about this. If you've been watching geopolitics or international affairs very much, I am almost certain that you came across this at least a few times. At least over the next past several years, every now and then it gets in the news. And what it is, the nine dash line is a line created by or claimed by China to where it says this is our water, this is our area, where it's our sovereign territory, and that's key. That they want to claim it as sovereign territory. Now, this differs from what's called an exclusive economic zone, which is what the Philippines has, and Vietnam and Malaysia, as you see right there. Um, these countries surround the South China Sea, and they're the ones being impacted by this. At least they're impacted directly by it. And because China is actually claiming this entire area, which normally is considered to be the high seas, as their personal property, this actually affects the entire world. Because any nation that has a ship transiting through it for trade, which would include American ships and Chinese ships and Panamanian ships and German ships and British ships, Italian ships and Brazilian ships, and all kinds of ships, India's ships, all kinds of ships go through this area for trade. And if China owns it, then it could determine who can go through and who can't go through. They could control that. And that's what this is really all about. Um, all the other pundits like Peter Zehan and others, um, most of them, or all except one that I know of, really talk about this as being an issue of resources. They want to get the fish in the sea, they want to get the oil in the bottom of the ocean, or they want to get mining rights to the nodules at the bottom of the ocean, or something like that. And in my opinion, that's totally wrong. It is all about power and control. I have my thesis right here, is what it's really all about. Let me read it to you. What I'm saying is that China seeks full sovereignty over the South China Sea, not merely for territory or resources, but because control is essential for dominating and subjugating its maritime neighbors. China wants to establish a modern maritime a form of its old tributary system. Uh, and a quest for that tributary system explains why China is willing to risk so much, including war. It's all about control and domination of the region. Um, Now, I mentioned something that might be you probably are not familiar with. That's called the tributary system. In the West, when a Western country wanted to control another country, we conquered it. That was what we did. In the Middle Ages, they did have the concept of what's called a vassal state. And the tributary system is kind of sort of like that, but there are differences. But let me show you what I mean. If we go back in time to 1820, you have the Qing Empire. Okay, a little bit larger empire than it is today. Um, it includes areas that are now part of Russia because Russia came in the 1850s and took some of this land from China, which is going to be part of another video. But if you look at these orange areas here, Burma, Nepal, uh, Kyrgyzstan, Korea, um, what's now Vietnam. These are actual tributary states. And in a tributary state, the tributary state recognized the superiority of China. Every year, they would send a representative there to the court, and they would do what's called kowtow, which is basically a very it shows complete submission to China. Typically, they're prostrate on the ground, on the floor, and showing complete submission to China. Um, And with that, they would get trade concessions and some other goodies. Um, but China did not go in and control them administratively. So Korea, for instance, the Joseon Empire was able to were able to run its own affairs and still be in the tributary system. But they're under the control of China. If China told them to jump, they had to jump. Now, let's go back to the current situation. China, when I said this is about control and domination, not about resources. Um, Now, for the other countries like Vietnam and Philippines, Malaysia, it is about resources. It's about the exclusive economic zone. Now, I just want to reiterate about that. The exclusive economic zone, these are not claims by these countries, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, the United States. We have our exclusive economic zone. Canada has its. Great Britain has its exclusive economic zone. Also called an EEZ, exclusive economic zone. But these zones are not claimed by any country. They are awarded as rights by the UN. They don't have to make any overt claim to it. It's theirs from the get go. And so there is no conflicting claims here. The Now there are times when in the exclusive economic zones of different countries, there could be disputes as to exactly where they fall. Um, like for instance, here we have Malaysia, and here we have the Philippines. Exactly where does it fall? Where's that line between the Malaysia and the Philippines fall in here? This is where they go to the UN, and the UN makes a determination, and they draw the line. And all the countries of the world, when they get their EEZ, they're basically, because it is awarded to them by the UN, they're basically um, they're basically recognizing the UN as the arbiter on any kind of discussion about where the EEZ rights lines actually fall. Um, but that's not what's going on here, because again, China is not concerned with the EEZ. They're not making any kind of EEZ claim or anything. This is all about sovereignty. Now, let's talk a little about sovereignty when it comes to the ocean. Every nation that has shoreline has its territorial rights that go out 12 miles. That's it, 12 miles. Now, there is another 12 miles that goes out 24. That's called the contiguous um, area. And a country has certain rights over it, but it's still considered to be the high seas. So a country could pass its ships through, by your country 15 miles, 20 miles offshore, and another country can't do a damn thing about it. Free passage is there. If you're sailing, if you have your own ship and you're sailing it, you can sail it, to let's say 15 miles off the coast of Spain, for instance, and Spain can't do a damn thing about it. That's totally legal, and that's called right of free passage. So you have that. But then there's another zone called exclusive economic zone that goes out 200 miles. But that's all it is. It's an economic zone for that country. It is still the high seas. Now, how do we mean the high seas? What does that actually mean? Well, if you're on board a ship, let's say you're on board a ship, a Carnival cruise ship, and you're in Fort Lauderdale Harbor, and a crime is committed on board that ship. Somebody killed somebody. Well, because it took place in port, in the territorial waters of the United States, in this case, actually Florida, um, then that murder case would be held under the laws of Florida. As simple as that. If, on the other hand, you're in a Carnival cruise ship and you're out in the ocean somewhere, you're more than 12 miles from any country. You're more than 12 miles off the United States coast, but you're more than 12 miles away from Cuba. You're more than 12 miles away from the Bahamas. You're in what's called the high seas, and somebody on board commits a crime. Now, technically, unless there's other arrangements between countries, then that crime would be tried in the nation on which that ship is flying. So if that ship is flying, let's say, a Panamanian flag, then it would be then that trial would be in Panama. If they're flying, let's say, a Swedish flag, then it would be in Sweden, etc., etc. So that's on the high seas. The flag of the ship determines the jurisdiction of whatever crimes that might get committed. Now, let's look a little more at this South China Sea. Why would China want to have sovereignty? What does that give them? Well, it gives them control, because all the countries around here, they ship through this. They ship through the South China Sea. Something like 25% of all shipping in the world in a year goes through the South China Sea. So you think about it. Japan's up here. North Korea, Republic of Korea is up here. Taiwan is up here. Philippines, of course, Vietnam. All these countries, their ships run in and out of the South China Sea. If China controlled them, or I should say, if China controlled this sea as their own personal private territory, then they would control the trade of all these countries. And then these countries would in effect become vassal states or tributary states of China. Now let's take a look at now. And for China, this is a normal state of affairs. This is what they did for many, many years. For many, all their empires. This one is from 1820, but if you went back to 1500, it would be other countries. And if you went back to 500 AD, it would be other countries. The tributary system was almost, I believe, was in place for all the empires. They all did this. It was part of the way they operated. So for them, it's a very natural, normal thing to do. So for the Chinese Communist Party, they want to expand their power. Establishing a tributary system over all the countries around it would really feel normal, feel familiar to them. That's for sure. Now, I'm going to show you a person who I really, really like. I think her analysis and her understanding of geopolitics is absolutely top notch. Have you ever heard of Sarah Payne? She is from the Naval War College. She's a professor there and a lecturer there. And she has a number of YouTube videos. This is a YouTube video I'll be sharing a little bit of it with you. Here she's talking about what is China's grand strategy. So she's touching on a little bit about what I'm talking about. Let me get that started.
It's a different way of gluing together the world. And they're fundamentally different. So you have a Western order that's rules-based, it's universalistic. The Chinese world order is based on Chinese civilization, and historically the Chinese believed there was one civilization, theirs. Everybody else were barbarians. And the assumption of that one is that it would eventually just spread. People would naturally sinify, right? Sinocentric, these words, sinification, those sorts of words don't apply to other countries the way they do China, right? This is just a piece of Chinese culture. And that's the natural order of things, is China at the center. So for years, in the mid-19th century, when the Westerners came and they defeated China on China's territory, what a gross embarrassment. And then the Japanese doubled down on all of that. For Chinese today, it's the great moment to return Asia to normalcy and the world to normalcy, which is China at the center. And it's also that, like the Russians, it's this continental view that if I own a lot of territory, that makes me important. The more I have, the better. And then they treat the seas like territory because they're going to more seas, the better. Whereas in the maritime order, seas are the network that connects everybody. It's freedom of navigation. What good does a sea do you if you can't get within 500 miles of someone's coastline? You can't deliver anything or pick anything up. So they're antithetical world orders. The Chinese historically deal only bilaterally with people. They still do. Like, what's China's massive alliance system? It doesn't. And it treats smaller, it says these things routinely. It treats smaller powers as inferiors, which means just about everybody on the planet is smaller, so everyone's an inferior. And they're going to go boss people around. And so then when you're looking at all this, someone of your generation ought to consider, so what does Putin want the world to look like in 50 years?
Okay, it's just getting a little bit on Russia there a little bit. But I do recommend looking at her videos. She is really quite amazing. Now, when we look at what she says and what I say, they're very similar. I'm going to just show you something here. Okay. I have a little thing together comparing her analysis versus my analysis, and she's pretty similar to what I'm saying. She's also recognized that it's about control and influence, not really about economic resources and trade. So, like right down here, when it says trade and resources, my analysis is that it's a secondary. It's a secondary issue. It's not the driver, and her analysis is really the same. It's also secondary. The main driver is asserting authority and shaping the regional order. Well, that's pretty much what I'm saying. I just give it a name. I'm calling it a modern tributary system. That's what I'm. That's my little addition to the argument. Anyway, I hope this really clarified things for you a little bit. I'm sure you have some questions. Please leave comments and questions. This particular document here with the two maps and my comparison of Sarah's analysis and my analysis, that's going to be on Patreon if you want to get at it. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be going on about now. By the way, there's other issues here. The Philippines, what they're doing, and India's coming into the picture here. India, which has never had any play in the South China Sea, totally outside of their quote unquote region, they're now beginning to play in it, because they're selling BrahMos missiles to Vietnam and to the Philippines, which is interesting to say the least. Anyway, with that, I'll let it go. There's a million other questions. I could go off in several different directions on this and continue the discussion for a lot longer time. But this covers the big parts of it. Oh, by the way, with Taiwan, I did an artificial intelligence war game with China invading Taiwan and seeing how that played out. If you're interested in this part of the world, check out those war games. I did two of them, by the way. But I do recommend looking at one of them. I think you'll find it interesting. My take on it and my conclusion was quite different from what CSIS came up with. CSIS, that's the Center for Strategic and International Studies. They did a war game on China invading Taiwan about a year ago. Anyway, with that, I'll be saying goodbye. And like I said, please do like and subscribe. If you thought this was interesting, I know I find it fascinating. Hope you do too. Let other people know about this. I could use these. I could use the views. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.